I am Margaret Hensley, 76, a retired bookkeeper who remembers every number except the ones that measure how much time I have left. 15 minutes after the oncologist said the biopsy looked malignant, my son's wife posted a picture of herself in a white bikini, waist-deep in turquoise water, captioned, "Finally free of the burden." The picture auto-loaded on my phone because I forgot how to turn off family sharing. My name wasn't written, but I knew exactly which burden had just been lifted. The hallway outside the exam room smelled like lemon cleaner and paper gowns. I sat there because the room felt too small, because the word malignant kept hitting the inside of my ribs like a bird that couldn't find a window. The nurse asked if I had someone she could call. I thought of Daniel, my only child, and then of his calendar, full of meetings and his wife's list of reasons. I told the nurse I'd be fine. She tucked the gown into the sharps bin like it was a note we were both pretending not to read. I held the phone higher and pinched the image open. Sunlight was on Amber's shoulders, and Daniel was an arm's length away in the background, grinning, holding a plastic cup with something neon in it. I tried to remember when he had last grinned that easily at me. On the bottom of the post were small hearts floating up like balloons. I scrolled the comments because I wanted to see a mistake, a joke, a relief that would let me put the bird back in its cage. There was no mistake, only a friend who typed absolute freedom and another who added a string of laughing faces that looked like small, round mouths refusing to close. The nurse, Carla, her badge said, brought me a paper cup of water and set it on my knee. "Do you need a ride?" she asked. I said no again. My voice surprised me. It didn't shake. I looked at the cup and thought, absurdly, that it was generous. This small round measure that would never overflow, this thing that could be held. The word burden was a stone in my mouth. I tried to swallow it. It stayed. After a while, I put the phone in my purse and stood up. I walked down the corridor toward the automatic doors. They parted for me without asking any questions at all. Outside the clinic, the rain had rinsed the city and left the lot smelling like pennies. I sat in my car and watched my breath fade on the windshield. The doctor wanted more scans. The scans required a driver. The driver would be me. I took the slow road along the river and let the city pass without asking me for anything. At home, I set my keys in the clay dish Daniel made in 3rd grade, glazed the color of a bruise. I brewed tea, because that is what you do when the world says malignant and gives you nothing to hold. I dialed my son. He answered from an echoing place and said they were wheels up for Cabo. Could I push the scan to next week? He told me he loved me. We hung up. The tea went bitter in the time it takes for a heart to hear the word later. I sold the house when the yard began to outrun me. Now I live above a bakery that wakes before the sun and perfumes the stairwell with yeast and sugar. Daniel once floated the idea that we live together. Amber said the school district was a maze. I learned then that complicated is an excellent word for a no that still wants to be admired. By evening, the pain settled under my ribs with the confidence of a tenant who had found the lease. A small knock came at the door. Lily stood there in a purple jacket with stars on the pockets. "Dad told me not to bother you," she said, "so I came fast." She held up a bag of heart-shaped cookies. We sat in the kitchen and she told me about swimsuits and boarding passes and the neighbor's paddleboard. Then her voice thinned. "Mom says you're too tired to live with us. Is that true?" I told her I was tired today and that I would find a way for us to have more time. She believed me because I have never promised her something I did not keep. Before she left, she pulled a photo from her backpack. Daniel at 6, gap-toothed in a paper crown. "Dad used to be funny," she said. "He can still be," I said, and we looked at the boy until the kitchen got quiet enough to hear the bakery below shaping tomorrow. When the door closed, The apartment felt larger, the way a chest does after someone stops crying. My phone lit up. Amber had texted, "Hope you're resting. Dan's stressed. Please don't lay this on him right now." I put the phone face down and washed Lily's cup. In the morning, Carla called to confirm my scans. She asked again if I had someone to bring me and take me home. I said I was arranging it. She said anesthesia doesn't care how independent a person is. After we hung up, I opened the folder where I keep the bones of a life, certificates, returns. The last mortgage notice with the word paid stamped at the bottom. At the back was a thin envelope from a shipyard where I worked in my 20s. The paper had yellowed along the fold. Inside were numbers that had been growing without me, and a note about unclaimed property held by the state if no beneficiary was on file. I typed my name into the state website. 2 careful fingers. My name appeared with a blurred sum and a button that said claim. Heat rose in my face, the kind that comes when the machinery of the world admits it remembers you. I made an appointment and wrote it on a sticky note. My hand, which had trembled since the biopsy, steadied. That afternoon, Daniel called from an airport lounge where every chair looked expensive. He wanted to talk about unlocking equity. He had a friend with ideas. I asked who would own the idea if I ran out of time before it finished unlocking. He changed the subject to Lily's recital and told me I was brave. When we hung up, I lay on the couch and listened to trays banging in the bakery below. Radiology was patient machines and strangers who knew where to put their fear while they were lying still. Carla adjusted a blanket over my knees as if I were a person worth adjusting. I closed my eyes and rehearsed a conversation I had not yet decided to have. In it, I told Daniel I planned to see a lawyer. In it, he said Mom the old way, like the word might crack. In it, I didn't cry. Afterward, I walked to a low building behind the courthouse with a sign that said State Treasurer, Unclaimed Property. The waiting room smelled like copy paper. A woman took my identification. A man with a coffee ring on his blotter explained how money wanders and how, once in a while, it wanders back. He clicked and turned the monitor. There was my name again, and beneath it a number that made my mouth go dry. We talked about steps and proof and options. I nodded like a student. On the sidewalk, I laughed once, the sound a hiccup makes when it apologizes. I bought a notebook with a green cover and, on the first page, wrote, "Make a plan. Put people in it. Protect Lily. Find a lawyer." I crossed out the last line because the name had already arrived. Noah Green, once the boy who brought his mother's Tupperware to church potlucks, now kept a small office near the river and a reputation for keeping his word. I called from the curb. He recognized my voice and lowered his, the way people do when the conversation matters. "Come by tomorrow," he said. "We'll take this one page at a time." When I hung up, the city looked newly lettered, street names bright against the wet. I went home and boiled water again because beginnings are easier if your hands stay busy. That night, I dreamed of ledgers, 2 columns, and a pencil, sharp as a tooth. In one column, I wrote the things Daniel feared: loss, struggle, embarrassment. In the other, I wrote the things I feared: disappearing in place, letting someone else decide what became of me, leaving Lily without a woman who knows which question to ask when men try to win by talking faster. In the morning, I put on my good sweater and the scarf Lily says makes me look like a movie star. I slipped the green notebook into my purse and went to meet the part of my life that would not apologize for taking up space. Noah's office sat above a flower shop that smelled like wet leaves and ink. He stood to shake my hand, his tie slightly crooked in a way that made him look human. "Let's start with what you want to protect," he said. I told him about the diagnosis, the post, the unclaimed pension sitting in some state account like a forgotten apology. He listened quietly, tapping the edge of his pen against a legal pad. When I finished, he leaned forward. "We can set up a living trust," he said. "You'll stay in control. If you want to leave assets for a cause or put conditions on who inherits, we'll make that part of the document." "Conditions," I repeated. "Like what?" "Whatever makes sense to you. For example, your son only inherits if certain promises are kept, like maintaining your home or caring for your granddaughter." I nodded. "And if they don't, then everything transfers to a charity of your choosing." The word charity settled in my chest. "Dignity," I said. "That's what I want it called. For old people who've been treated like they're already gone." He wrote the name in block letters at the top of the page. The Dignity Fund. For a second, I felt my pulse steady. He asked about medical directives, power of attorney, all the cold, precise phrases that make dying sound like paperwork. I signed where he pointed and wondered why it felt like breathing again. When I left, rain was sliding off the awning like beads of mercury. I stopped at a pharmacy, bought a small digital recorder, and slipped it into my purse. My reflection in the window looked sharper, less apologetic. At home, I made tea and called Daniel. He picked up on speaker, his voice wrapped in background laughter. "Hey, Mom, can I call you later? We're just leaving dinner." "This won't take long," I said. "I hired a lawyer." He paused. "What for?" "To arrange my affairs." "Mom, that sounds extreme." "It's practical. I'm setting up a trust for Lily's future and a charity fund." Amber's voice floated in faintly. "Tell her not to worry about that stuff." Daniel sighed. "Amber says we can handle things when we need to." "I already am," I said. "You'll both be part of the trust, but there are terms." "What terms?" "That you keep the house as a home. No selling, no refinancing, no using it as collateral. 10 years minimum." "Mom," he said slowly, "you don't need to protect us from ourselves." "I wish that were true." He went quiet. I pressed the recorder's red button. "This isn't punishment," I said. "It's boundaries." "Boundaries," he repeated, like it was a foreign word. "Lily deserves stability." I continued. "And I'm donating the rest to the Dignity Fund." "Donating? To strangers? To people who still think love is work, not inheritance?" He exhaled hard into the phone. "You're not thinking straight." "I'm thinking clearer than I have in years." The silence after that was long enough for my tea to go cold. "I'll stop by tomorrow," he said finally. "We'll talk." "I have appointments," I told him. "Next week's better." When the call ended, I sat at the table, staring at the tiny red light. I wasn't angry. I just felt the precise weight of being done explaining myself. The next morning, Carla, my nurse, called to remind me about my treatment. "You're handling this alone?" she asked. "I'm handling it," I said. "Good," she said softly. "But even the strongest people need a plan for after." "I'm working on one," I told her, and she sounded relieved, not knowing how literal I meant it. After treatment, I walked along the river until I reached Noah's office again. We reviewed the trust draft. Short sentences, clean clauses, no room for interpretation. When he asked who I wanted as executor, I said, "You, until Lily's 18. He blinked. "That's a lot of trust. I'm old enough to know who's worth it." We arranged for notarization later in the week. "Do you want this to stay private?" he asked. "I thought so," I said, "but maybe not. Maybe the people who called me a burden should hear how light I feel without them." He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "Public awareness can help your fund. We could do a small announcement, local paper, maybe Channel 8. "Something small," I said. "No spectacle." He nodded. "Then let's plan it. A dinner, maybe. Invite your son and his family. We'll be nearby if you need backup." I hesitated. "Feels like a trick." "It's not a trick," he said. "It's truth, with witnesses." That evening, I bought groceries, lemons, chicken thighs, rosemary, a fresh loaf of bread. I stopped by the cancer resource room and picked up a wig that looked almost like my old hair. When I got home, I tried it on, surprised at how ordinary I looked, like a woman who might still have choices. Lily dropped by after school, full of stories about spelling tests and playground bruises. She helped me slice lemons for the chicken, her small hands careful with the knife. "Dad says dinner's going to be fancy," she said. "Do I have to wear shoes?" "Barefoot's fine," I said. "It's how the honest people eat." She laughed, and for a moment the room smelled only of rosemary and warmth. After she left, I set the table with my best plates. I tucked the recorder under the runner and tested its red light. Tomorrow night would be the dinner. The reporter and Noah would wait in the next room until I gave the word. I stood at the window, watching lights blink on across the river. The city hummed softly, indifferent and steady. For the first time since the diagnosis, I didn't feel fragile. I felt like someone about to keep a promise. To herself, to a little girl, to the part of the world still worth forgiving. Daniel and Amber arrived carrying the smell of rain and new money. Daniel kissed my cheek the way people do when they aren't sure if it's expected. Amber set a bottle of wine on the counter without removing the price tag. She looked beautiful, which is often another way to say careful. Lily ran between us, proud of the table she had set. We sat, and the chicken gave off its lemon heat. The first few minutes were small talk, thin as broth, workload, traffic, school projects. I watched Daniel's eyes move around the room, mapping the furniture as if estimating square footage. He complimented the curtains. I told him they came with the lease. Amber poured wine into her own glass first, then Daniel's. "You look amazing, Margaret," she said. "We were so relieved when you said the treatment worked." "It worked for now," I said. "Or maybe I'm just stubborn." She laughed in the polite register of someone waiting for the real topic. I carved the chicken and placed a piece on each plate. Daniel began talking about property values and interest rates. I listened, nodding, letting the silence afterward stretch until it hummed. "I met with the lawyer again," I said finally. The fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "About the trust?" "Yes, we finished it. Everything's signed." Amber smiled tightly. "That's wonderful. You'll have peace of mind." "I will. The Dignity Fund is officially active, and the house, it stays in the family as long as you both take care of it and of Lily. No loans, no sales, no excuses." Daniel blinked, a slow reset. "You're giving it away?" "I'm giving it direction," I said. Amber's voice sharpened. "You're making this public?" Before I could answer, a knock sounded. Noah opened the door with a quiet courtesy. Behind him was a young reporter from Channel 8, holding a mic and the uncertain expression of someone invited into grief. Daniel stood. "Mom, what is this?" "It's the announcement," I said. "The fund is launching tonight. They wanted the founder's words." The reporter turned on the small camera, its red light catching on the silverware. I spoke the sentences Noah and I had shaped, about dignity, about how kindness should not depend on who is convenient to love. Daniel's chair scraped back. "You're humiliating us." "You did that yourself?" I said softly. He took a step forward, then stopped. His hands were shaking, the way his fathers used to when the bills piled up. For a moment, I saw the boy in the paper crown, terrified of disappointing anyone. The reporter lowered the mic, unsure. Amber looked toward the door, calculating escape. Lily whispered, "Dad?" And that was what broke him. He knelt beside her, not in prayer or apology, but as if his knees had forgotten the word pride. The camera caught everything, the posture of a man who had run out of clever. I touched his shoulder. "You're still my son," I said, "but this is mine to finish." Noah handed him a copy of the trust summary. Daniel stared at the paragraph about conditions, his lips moving silently through each line. He nodded once. Not agreement, just acknowledgement that the math added up. The reporter thanked us, awkward and pale. When they left, the apartment felt too bright. Lily went to her room. Amber followed without speaking. Daniel stood by the window. "Mom," he said, "I didn't mean for any of it to go this way." "I know," I said. "None of us ever mean the things that ruin us." He turned, and for the first time in years, he looked directly at me. "Will you at least tell me when it's time?" "When it's time, you'll know," I said. He nodded, pocketed the paper, and walked out with the weight of it bending his shoulders. The door closed softly, a goodbye that didn't need its name spoken. I gathered the plates, still warm, and stacked them in the sink. The recorder under the table kept its small red light, blinking like a heart that hadn't decided whether to keep beating. Tomorrow I would call Noah to finalize the press release. Tonight, I washed dishes until the water cooled, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like the burden anyone had to carry. A month later, the apartment was quieter than I'd ever known it. The plants leaned toward the window like they were still hopeful. Hospice sent a nurse named Ruth who hummed under her breath and called everyone sweetheart. She placed my pills in a tiny cup that clinked like jewelry. Most mornings I woke before sunrise just to hear the bakery downstairs begin its day. That sound, metal trays, soft voices, felt like proof that the world kept going whether I was ready or not. Daniel came twice a week now. He didn't talk much about the fund or the news clip that still floated online, tagged a mother's lesson in dignity. When he arrived, he swept the floor, checked the mail, made tea without asking if I wanted any. I didn't stop him. Sometimes we sat in silence while Lily colored beside us. She'd ask about the lighthouse she'd drawn, and I'd tell her it looked strong enough to keep a secret. One afternoon, he handed me a folded document. "I signed the compliance form," he said. "House stays in the family, no loans, no sales." I meant what I said. I believed him. The arrogance had drained out of his voice, replaced by something smaller, but truer. "That's all I ever needed to hear," I told him. When he left that evening, I wrote Lily a letter. I told her people confuse love with comfort, but love is really attention, the act of looking at someone long enough to see who they are. I told her that sometimes doing the right thing will look like betrayal to others, and she shouldn't let that scare her. I sealed the letter and gave it to Noah for safekeeping. A week later, I asked Ruth to open the curtains wide. The light was almost too clean. I could hear Daniel in the kitchen whispering to Lily, telling her she could say goodbye any way she wanted. She tiptoed to my bedside and placed her lighthouse drawing on my chest. "So you can find us," she said. I smiled, because I already had. When the room went still, Ruth covered my hands with a blanket and whispered that everything was in order. Outside, the oven started again, and somewhere far down the street, a bell rang for the hour. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.